Welcome everyone. Let's begin our lesson for today by going over the learning goals and success criteria. First, what are we learning? We're learning how to recognize independent and dependent variables and relate them back to your understanding of fixed and varying quantities, how to recognize the proper domain and range of various scenarios, how to recognize the various mappings that can occur between domain and range, and how to relate graphs, descriptions, and function equations to one another. How are we learning it? Through the Understanding Functions notes and the Understanding Functions assignment. When can we use this information? To create functions that represent various data that can be used for work obligations or when determining scores needed to achieve a certain grade point average, as well as to connect and group information together when the information is the same but represented differently. How do we know we learned it? By getting a score of 4 on the Understanding Functions assignment. Now let's take a look at our agenda for today. We will begin by going over the learning goals and success criteria. While we're doing that, you'll fill out your Get It Started, as well as turn in your Reasoning with Relationship study guide. Once you've completed your Get It Started, we'll go over it together and answer any questions that you may have. After that, we'll go over the Understanding Functions notes, and then I'll give you time to complete the Understanding Functions assignment on Desmos. Once you've completed the assignment, we'll go over it together and answer any questions that you may have. At the end of class, we'll go back over our learning goals and success criteria while you fill out your Before You Go. Your only homework for tonight is to complete any incomplete assignments that you may have. Let's take a look now at the Understanding Functions notes. The notes begin with the learning goals and success criteria. Now within that, there are different kinds of mappings. There are 4 different kinds of mappings. The first one is one-to-one. The second is one-to-many. The third is many-to-one. And the last one is many-to-many. Now what does that look like? So one-to-one mappings mean that for every element in the domain, it maps to exactly 1 in the range. And it also works in the other way. For everyone in the range, there's exactly 1 in the domain that it maps to. So here we can see that this one maps to this one, and this one maps to this one. So in both the domain and range, I don't see where they map to 2 different places. So that's one-to-one mapping. One-to-many. So one-to-many means that there is an element in the domain that is mapping to many or multiple places in the domain. So one-to-many means that there's a point here in the domain that's mapping to many or multiple places in the range. So for instance, I have this one and it's mapping here and here. So this is one-to-many. So even though all the other elements are okay, if even one of them goes to multiple places, it becomes a one-to-many mapping. Okay, many-to-one. So many-to-one means that there are elements in the domain that map to exactly 1 in the range, but there are multiple spots in the domain that map to the same spot in the range. For instance, we have these 2 here, and they both go to this point in the range, so this is many-to-one. So many, meaning multiple in the domain, map to 1 spot in the range. The last one is many-to-many. And this means that there are multiples that go in both directions. So it's both many-to-one and one-to-many. So here we have this point here that's mapping to multiples here in the range. And we also have this one in the range that's mapping to multiples in the domain. So this is many-to-many. Now, determining whether something is a function or not. A function only exists when each member of the domain maps to exactly 1 member of the range. So in order for something to be a function, it needs to be either one-to-one or many-to-one. Now for it to not be a function, that means that something in the domain maps to multiple places in the range. So in order for it to be not a function, it needs to be one-to-many or many-to-many. So let's look at an example here. We have the books in a library and the number of pages in each book. So notice there are no actual elements. We need to use our logic here. So the domain is the number of pages. The mapping, now we need to decide. So the question is it possible for multiple books to have the same number of pages? Well, yeah, we can have 2 books with the same number of pages. Is it possible, though, for a certain number of pages to belong to different books? Well, yes, so this becomes a one-to-many scenario, and we know that one-to-many means that it is not a function because we can have a number of pages. Let's say this is 25 pages, and we could have 6 books that are 25 pages each. So it's one to many, and it is not a function. So our explanation would be several books may contain the same number of pages. So this is how you'll do your activity for today. Now let's take a look at the vertical line test. So this is another way to check to see if something is a function. So first of all, we need to check to see if there's exactly one y for every x, or one member of the range for every member of the domain. So if at any point I can draw a vertical line through the graph of a function and touch in 2 places, then it is not a function. So in this case, we draw a line here, and we can see that it is not a function. Let's look at another example. We have a function here, and we need to decide, is this a function based on the vertical line test? So if I draw this, I can see that no matter where I draw my line, it still doesn't touch in 2 places, so therefore this is a function. Let's talk now about how to sign in to Desmos to complete your work. So what we're going to do is you're going to click on the link to go to the assignment, and it should take you to a page that looks kind of like this. And right here where it says sign in with Google, we're going to click there. And it's going to pop up with our email accounts. You're going to click on your school email account, and it should already have you logged in because you should have already been logged in using Google Classroom. From there, I'm just going to click start the activity, and it will take me into the assignment and allow me to begin. So that's how you will log in to Desmos using Google. Let's take a look now at the Understanding Functions assignment. The assignment begins with the learning goals and success criteria. If we scroll down, there's a link here to take us to the Desmos activity. Go ahead and click on that link, and it should take you to a page that looks like this. Let's go ahead and click Start the Activity. The activity begins with the learning goals and success criteria. We'll go ahead and click Next. Here's the instructions. So we're going to determine the direction of the function and group the functions according to the direction of the functions. So if the relationship is a function in both directions, group it under both. If it is a function in only one direction, put only one. And if it's a function in neither direction, put neither. So we'll go ahead and click Next. And we're given a bunch of functions here. And we should have some cards here, and these are the ones we want to look for, where it says both are functions, only one is a function, and neither is a function. So that's what we want, and we're going to go ahead and move the other ones around away from it. And then we're going to place these where they belong. So this one here, we want to check to see, is it a function in both directions? Well, I don't see any repeats here or here. So therefore, this is a function in both directions. So we drag it and place it here for both directions. This one here is a function in one direction, right? Because it passes the vertical line test. Now if we flipped it and did a horizontal line test, it only passes in one direction. So this is a function in one direction. And you'll do that for each of these. You're going to decide, is it a function in one direction, both directions, or neither direction? So does it pass the vertical and horizontal line test, essentially? And if you're not sure what the function looks like, graph it in Desmos and then decide. So go ahead and do that for each of these. You're going to decide neither, one direction, or both directions. Then you'll click Next and do the same thing here. So one direction, both directions, and neither direction. And then click Next. Same thing here, one direction, both directions, neither direction. And then when you're done, you'll go ahead and go back to your Google form and click Next. This will take you to your Before You Go. Go ahead and fill out your Before You Go and then submit your work on Google Classroom.